In September of the year 1297, along the shores of the river surged forth a battle-worn Scottish army of ordinary folk, tillers of the land, and a select few, the knights, readied themselves to confront the formidable power of England.
Hesitation shows weakness, my
Arrayed
lord.
against them
The
was
Scots
among the
are but a
mightiest
rabble.
forces in Europe,
Ford upstream
commanded
will
by
be
the Earl of
safer
Surrey beneath the banner of King Edward II. However, what ensued was not merely a clash of steel, but a true master at work, an artful maneuver. William Wallace and Andrew Moray crafted a slender wooden crossing into a perilous abyss, obliterating a foe towering over them. The Battle of Stirling Bridge did not become merely a military triumph, yet a pivotal instance in Scotland's enduring struggle for liberation. The year was 1296, and the proud kingdom of Scotland lay in ruins. Under the oppressive rule of England's monarch, Edward I, a figure etched in the annals of history as the Hammer of the Scots. Scotland, once a sovereign domain adorned with its own regal insignia, its own aristocrats, and its own obstinate, the feeling of liberation, had been broken in one solitary year of triumph. The magnificent, the Scottish defeat at Dunar that spring had left the aristocracy defeated, fortresses yielded, and cities claimed. Edward I acted quickly to assert his authority. They captured the Stone of Destiny from Scone, the revered coronation stone of Scotland monarchs, and conveyed it to Westminster as a prize, an emblem that Scotland's freedom had vanished. He compelled almost each noble knight of Scotland and prominent landowner to pledge loyalty to him via the notorious Ragman roll. With the ruling elite tethered to him by pledge, whether born of trepidation or practicality or aspiration, Edward held a conviction about Scotland was calm. Yet triumph inscribed on paper and triumph within the souls of a nation are distinct entities. The English, the Crown, enforced severe taxes upon Scotland, supervised by Edward's officials who exhausted the resources of the land to fund the king's perpetual conflicts in France and Wales. Troops stationed in towns and fortresses, frequently addressing the Scots, the populace, with contempt. Most infamous among them was Hugh Cressingham, a figure closely associated with Edward, the treasurer in Scotland. Cressingham transformed into a despised character, recalled for his harshness and avarice. Tales circulated about him, draining Scotland of its essence, enhancing himself while neglecting the needs of others, common folk. The daily existence of ordinary Scots became more severe. Farmers observed their crops and animals requested to supply the English armies.
Send word to the northern lairds.
Merchants had to bear substantial costs.
Immediately. They won't expect us to cross
for
here.
road usage. Priests were observed with doubt, and murmurs of insurrection delivered immediate retribution. Scotland, within brief, engaged, yet always wild. Although numerous esteemed lords had yielded the knee, resistance started to wane. Within the ranks of the lesser nobility, and beyond perilously for Edward, amidst the ordinary people. The uprising had not yet found its rhythm, but burst forth in sporadic displays of rebellion. Tax collectors in England were surprised on desolate paths. Garrisons existed disturbed during the night by small groups of men with weapons. Fortresses governed by English authority were surrounded by the locals' rebels. Two figures appeared as the embodiments of this escalating turmoil. In the northern regions, Andrew Moray of Bothwell, a youthful aristocrat who had fled from England imprisonment following Dunbar, elevated the standard of insurrection in the Highlands. With cleverness and determination, he gathered support. Clans and freeholders, besieging castles in the northern regions of England and Scotland. In the southern region, a silhouette of from modest beginnings, yet a passionate spirit emerged notably, William Wallace. The name he bears initially appeared in English documentation In May, in 1297, he took the life of the English sheriff of Lanark in a bold display of rebellion. Soon, Wallace and his band of insurgents were attacking English patrols, conducting raids, conveyance of goods, and disappearing into the woodlands. To the English, he was the offender. For the Scots, a hero in the creating. As the summer of 1297 approached, Scotland burned with insurrection. Wallace and Moray had not yet allied with others, but both were accumulating power. The individuals resentful due to English oppression gathered to their standards. Farmers left behind the implements of their labor. Artisans set down their instruments, and youthful warriors hungry for retribution grasped the spear and sword. Edward the Fern, nonetheless, was not present at Scotland. His aspirations shifted toward France. The governance of the nation shifted instead of his lieutenants. John de Wire, Earl of Surrey, an experienced yet seasoned leader, and the loathed Hugh de Sessingham. Surrey readied itself to advance north with an exceptional English host, resolute in making an impact, put an end to rebellion once and for all.
The Scots grow bolder with each passing day.
What is it?
This
Awaited
cannot
him.
stand.
However, it was no disorganized group mob. In September of the year 1297, William Wallace, Andrew Moray, and his allies had come together, joining their strengths in close proximity to Stirling.
We press on.
And in unison, they were on the verge of
Scotland.
revealing one of the most masterful surprises in the annals of medieval history. The chronicles recount the tale of William Wallace in pieces,
Push them
and
back.
folklore has completed the narrative
is
what
falling.
history omits.
Charge!
Our understanding, it is clear that he was not exceptional, exalted. Born into a modest landowning family, relatives residing in Eldersley close to Paisley, Wallace found himself with minimal stakes and all to be won. When the English firmed their hold on
Scots are upon
Scotland,
us, sir.
by
bridge is
1297
too
the name
narrow.
of Wallace had already emerged, murmured with a mix of reverence and trepidation. English documents label him a killer, a rogue, and a renegade. Scottish
Retreat!
recollections endure him in a new light, as the man who took a bold step respond fiercely when others yielded heads. His defiance truly sparked in. In May of 1297, Wallace embarked on a bold assault on the Sheriff of Lanark, William Hessel. The English official stood fallen, his forces dispersed. This deed, whether ignited by a quest for retribution, the harshness of the English, or perhaps a combination of factors, propelled Wallace forward. A course of unrestrained conflict. The act of killing Hesselig echoed like a thunderclap across Scotland. To the English, Wallace stood as a perilous offender. For the Scots, he transformed into a symbol of resistance. Wallace's band was compact, yet lethal, impactful. He gathered from within common folk, renegades, and those stripped of their rights, anyone with a motive to despise the English. They were intimately familiar with the forests and hills, and they targeted the enemy's most vulnerable point. English patrols caught off guard in a tight spot glens. Supply trains have been set ablaze in the past, approaching fortifications. Garrisons came under attack in the darkness, illuminated by flames and filled with unexpected wonders. Wallace grasped a vital insight. He was capable do not engage the English in open terrain. Instead, he waged a battle cloaked in darkness, a conflict of endurance. Every triumph, nonetheless humble, expanded his renown and attracted more followers to his standard. As Wallace engaged in the southern lands, Andrew
Time for
Moore,
waiting is over.
scion of the Moore
These plans
lineage
show the path to victory.
of Bothwell,
Rise up, men
had
of
ignited
Scotland.
insurrection in the north. Having broken free from confinement after the calamity at Dunbar, he made his way back to his native land and elevated the banner of uprising at Avoch in Moore. The campaign led by Moore exuded confidence. He amassed backing from clans of the Highlands and independent landowners, surrounding fortresses held by the English and severing ties with fortifications. His triumphs were more subdued than Wallace's, yet equally important. More demonstrated exceptional talent in structuring and maintaining opposition spanning a vast area, evidence that Scotland's uprising had ceased to be the endeavors of outlaws in solitude, yet of an emerging patriotic endeavor. During the warm months of 1297, the rebellion ignited and spread with an unstoppable fervor. Within, in the northern expanse, More intensified his assault on fortresses of the English. In the southern region and the central lands were gripped by fear as Wallace's raids struck terror into the hearts of many. Authorities in England. As summer draws to a close, both individuals were acknowledged as figures of authority in the defiance of Scotland. The Church, as well, started to change. Although certain bishops stayed vigilant, apprehensive of Edward's wrath, others softly praised the uprising. Sanctuary was offered by priests to rebels, or provided coin from parish tithes to assist in equipping them. The essence of liberation was acquiring recognition. In August, or perhaps early on, in the month of September in the year 1297, the destinies of Wallace and More came together. However, their forces nurtured in diverse areas exchanged a shared objective. United, they held authority. It is estimated that there are around 6,000 to 8,000 men. Not a resolute military force, yet one that embodies professionalism. It was at Stirling, close to the slender, wooden bridge spanning the river, that they decided to take a stand. There the strategy was bold. Aiming to attract the significantly, the English army was lured into a cunning trap. In the interim, the lieutenants of Edward I assembled a formidable army. John de Warenne, the Earl of Surrey, advanced northward with multitudes of foot soldiers and horsemen. The treasurer, Hugh Cressingham, urged a rapid and devastating strike to eliminate insurrection before it could proliferate more. As September approached, the English army, comprising a force of 8,000 to 12,000 individuals, arrived at Stirling. They anticipated the Scots will dissolve before them. Rather, Wallace and Moray were discovered waiting. The soldiers concealed on the inclines above the slender wooden bridge. The platform was prepared for an exceptionally brilliant and unexpected triumphs in medieval history. The town of Stirling, nestled upon a rugged crag, topped by its castle, had endured for ages, has long been recognized as the essential element of Scotland. Whoever held the reins of Stirling held the power the crossing of the River Forth, the seamless divide between the lowlands and the highlands. To the south stretched the lush agricultural landscapes and pathways leading to England. To the north lay the untamed terrain where defiance was gaining momentum. The river flowed forth, wide and expansive, swampy at this juncture with a solitary, slender timber walkway linking the financial institutions. This bridge would demonstrate the pivotal point, determining the destiny of nations' equilibrium. To the English, it appeared not more than just a hurdle to overcome. To Wallace and More, it was the snare they had been anticipating. The forces of England, led by John de Wire, Earl of in September 1297, Surrey advanced northward. Estimates differ, yet the majority of accounts position its power within the range of 8,000 and 12,000 soldiers, comprising heavy cavalry, that the pride of English armies, countless knights clad in shining armor and mail, bolstered by squires and mounted warriors in armor. Numerous infantry levies, in the thousands of infantry assembled from England's the Shire, equipped with spears, axes, and bows. Welsh archers, masters of the longbow, formidable in direct confrontation, yet diminished successful in the wet terrain close to Stirling. Surrey was growing older and in a state of ill health. His subordinate, Hugh Cressingham, advocated fiercely for movement. Conceited and loathed by the Scots, Cressingham perceived the uprising as an annoyance that should be dealt with swiftly. The English commanders held the conviction that they confronted nothing more than a disorganized crowd, effortlessly scattered by the power of England's cavalry. Along the northern shore of the Forth, concealed within the ascending terrain in proximity to Abbey Craig, Wallace and Moray paused. Their strength was likely a diverse assembly of 6,000 to 8,000 men, a patchwork army of warriors, bladesmen, and a few of bowmen. Only a handful donned heavy armor. The majority battled in plain leather jerkins or padded gambersons, wielding spears as their main tool of offense. What the Scots, what they lacked in equipment, they compensated for in resolve and strategic ingenuity. Wallace and Moray assembled their forces into compact arrangements of schiltrons, shapes or forms teeming with extended poles crafted to fend off mounted troops. In an unobstructed expanse, these configurations could stumble beneath relentless assaults. However, on the boggy edges of the Forth, confined as they approached the narrow bridge, they found themselves able to demonstrate catastrophic consequences. The atmosphere of the duo the armies were unparalleled, distinct. Within the confines of the English camp, assurance prevailed. Knights gleamed their armor, proclaiming the simplicity triumph awaits. Many did not anticipate not merely to engage in combat, but to seize and take for oneself, envisioning Scotland as a realm abundant with treasures. Some even derided the very notion of Wallace and Moray, boldly confronting them in a direct clash. In the midst of the Scots, though faced with a somber atmosphere, remained steadfast and determined. These men battled not for fame or seas, yet for existence. A multitude had witnessed their residences subjected to taxation and flames, their families mistreated under English profession. They were aware of their situation, surrounded and overshadowed in resources, yet they were also familiar with the terrain, the waterway, and the significance of the bridge. Triumph. This would not merely be a victory achieved. It would serve as a representation of Scotland's "the defense of freedom remains a possibility." With the first light of day broke on September 11, 1297, the two armies stood opposed across the Forth. The strategy devised by the English appeared clear-cut, led their forces across the bridge and defeated the Scots with an overpowering might. Wallace and Moore, nonetheless, found themselves without the aim of encountering them on the same level conditions. Rather, they bided their time with quiet patience. For their moment, permitting solely a segment of the English army to traverse prior to unleashing their cunning scheme. It was a plan that demanded unwavering courage, an ill-timed advance, a hasty push, and the Scots faced the threat of complete destruction. However, Wallace and Moore had faith in their men and relied on the bridge to fulfill what Blades was unable to. The dawn of September, the dawn of the 11th in the year 1297, arrived with a cool, misty embrace. The river Forth lay enveloped in mist. The waters moved sluggishly beneath the narrow bridge crafted from wood. From the southern bank, the English army awakened. Banners unfurling in the breeze. Unfolding in the muted glow, armor the clattering sound echoed as knights took to their steeds' horses. On the northern shore, Wallace and Moore concealed their men behind the ascending terrain of Abbey Craig. The Scottish people remained still, weapons poised with unwavering resolve upon the earth. The dew sparkles on the armor they fashioned themselves. They were able to perceive the neigh of English horses and the sound of drums echoing over the water. However, they did. Remain still. Their leaders had issued one distinct arrangement. Hold on until the trap is fully prepared. Within the English camp, discord expanded. Several of Sour's advisors recommended exercise caution, recommending that the army seek an additional intersection. A ford was present. A short distance upstream, however, it would necessitate an extended journey. The Earl, fatigued and unwell, appeared to be leaning in the direction of patience. However, Huda Cressingham would not entertain it at all. Restless and determined to swiftly eliminate the uprising, he contended that hesitation was a sign of weakness. They asserted that the Scots were merely less than a disorganized group, not deserving of earnest apprehension. Why squander time marching upriver as the bridge stretched out ahead of them? For Cressingham, triumph was already confident. His words triumphed, that the English would traverse at Stirling Bridge. As the sun ascended, the English, the vanguard, commenced its crossing. The bridge stood slim, so slim that merely two warriors on horseback could charge forward together. What is it? Ought to have been the roar of the charging host, turned out to be rather sluggish, stopping parade. One by one, the knights, the infantry, and archers advanced in formation. Their banners danced gracefully above the veil of mist. Across the distant shore, the terrain constricted, nestled between the flowing river and the expansive marshes, confined between two boundaries. It was located here Wallace and Moray remained concealed, biding their time. From view, their men stood ready like a spiraled tension. For hours, the Scots stood in quietude as the English flowed throughout. The allure of making a swift move, it must have been truly vast. Every night that the enemy's strength was further bolstered the northern shore. However, if the Scots assaulted prematurely, they jeopardized being overcome just as the snare was about to snap shut. Wallace, resolute and unwavering, observed the bridge creaked under the burden of steeds and their riders. Moore, always the cautious, the strategist, urged his men to hold their positions and exercise patience. Until a sufficient number of the adversary had traversed, however, not an excessive amount. The essence of timing was paramount. Ultimately, when around 2,000 English forces, comprising formidable cavalry and the infantry, had crossed, the signal was given, provided. With a thunderous cry, the Scots advanced from their concealed spots. The atmosphere became saturated amidst the resounding war horns, the clash of arms, and the resolute shouts of warriors struggling to defend their territory. Staves bristled like a vibrant barrier as Wallace and Moray guided their formations down the slope in the direction of the confined English. The English-language knights, surrounded by the encroaching marshland to the sides and the slender pathway to their from behind, they were unexpectedly overwhelmed into a narrow passage. There was no space to navigate, no room to unleash the crushing cavalry charge that had triumphed countless struggles. Rather, they were compelled to engage amidst chaos, overwhelmed in opposition as the Scots converged inside. Panic erupted on the bridge itself. Men continued to traverse, witnessing the calamity unfold, unraveling on the distant shore, and endeavored to retrace your steps. Horses reared, and men tumbled down the water. And the wooden planks expanded glossy with crimson and earth. Those ensnared on the northern side, there appeared to be no way out. Their allies were obstructing the soul long ago. The Scots advanced with determination. Take advantage without mercy. Spears accelerated into the breastplates of valiant knights clad in armor. Equines overturned, shrieking into the water, and the infantry fell, struck down in their positions. The English advanced with unwavering confidence into a slaughterhouse of their own design. Among the deceased was none other than Hugh de Sessingham himself. The despised the treasurer who had ridiculed the Scots, and impetuous urgency was stifled in the struggling. By midday, the English vanguard, the north bank, faced total destruction. Countless bodies rest in the mire, their armor shimmering under the sunlight, their forms heaped amidst fractured lances and splintered barriers. The individuals who attempted to escape upon crossing the bridge, I discovered it was congested with men in retreat. Numerous individuals jumped into the stream merely to succumb under the burden of their protective gear. The valiant knights of England had been brought to its knees by the ordinary. Warriors, through cleverness and by the snare of the bridge, as Wallace and Morsrans observed, defeated the English vanguard to the north of the river. Disorder engulfed the South financial institution. From that point, countless English soldiers observed in dread as their comrades were ruthlessly taken down before their gaze. Initially, there were those who thought it was a temporary obstacle. Undoubtedly, they pondered, the knights would gather, align themselves, and navigate their path through the chaos of Scots. Yet, as the minutes stretched on, it became evident that a rally was not on the horizon. The bridge, choked with soldiers in retreat or escaping, provided no solace. Rather, it transformed into a perilous snare, collapsing beneath the throng of humanity. The Earl of Surrey, John Dewan, was a seasoned commander, yet the passage of time and the weight of sickness had muted his firmness of purpose. Reports poured into his retreat. The forefront was crumbling. Individuals of the male gender were submerged in the fort. Knights existed being pulled from their mounts by peasants brandishing spears. Several of Sure's, the captains, implored him to dedicate the remainder of the forces, to seize the bridge and overpower the Scots with sheer numbers. Some cautioned that the bridge itself was excessively limited and precarious, and that dispatching additional personnel would merely contribute to the sacrifice. Surrey hesitated. His uncertainty became evident deadly. On the northern shore, Wallace and Moore encouraged his men to push forward with greater intensity. The Chilterns pressed forward with unwavering determination pressure, constricting the grip on the captured English knights. The horses let out piercing cries as they fell into the muck. Protected men writhed in desperation as spears drove through their masculine. The Forth flowed crimson as men submerged, struggling against the heavy burden crafted from steel. Wallace, standing tall in the turmoil, cried out for mercy. This is greater than a conflict. It was retribution for the disgrace of Dunbar, for the destruction of villages throughout the years of English regulation. The Scots battled not merely armed, not just with weapons, but with an intense rage. The bridge creaked beneath the burden of men and horses attempting to escape, ultimately commenced to fall apart. Planks shattered, beams fractured, and whole segments collapsed. A multitude of men dove into the river, the cries engulfed by the torrent liquid sustenance. Some attempted to swim, but the weight of the heavy armor pulled them down. Then the bridge had transformed into a site of conflict and cemetery. Their forefront lay in ruins with the bridge in disrepair. The remnants, the English army, descended into chaos. Surrey, hesitant to jeopardize his whole, the command was issued to withdraw. Both knights and foot soldiers forsook the field, casting aside arms and standards in their urgency to break free. Some made their way south toward Berwick. Some dispersed into the rural expanse, merely to be pursued by Scottish clans in the days that ensued. The magnificent, the English host, which had advanced northward exuding an air of superiority and self-assurance, was now a broken fragment. As the dust settled, the battlefield was a charnel dwelling. Countless English soldiers rest lifeless on the northern shore of the Forth, their forms laid bare, devoid of protection by exuberant Scots. Wallace and Moore, their men, bloodied yet triumphant, stood as champions facing insurmountable challenges with slightly beyond bravery, cleverness, and the very terrain stands as their companion. They obliterated one of the most formidable armies England might summon. However, the Scots, despite their triumph, they had also suffered significant losses, fearless spirits. Among the most serious wounds marked the destiny of Andrew Moore. Wounded in combat, his time was short to witness the rewards of their triumph. His leadership, combined with Wallace's passion, was crucial to Stirling, and Scotland would soon grieve his void. The triumph at Stirling Bridge conveyed ripples across Britain. In regard to the initially, it was evident that the English were not unbeatable. A powerful influence of ordinary individuals, guided by two resolute. The commanders had subdued the formidable force of the army led by Edward I. Throughout Scotland, the church bells tolled and flames danced in the night. The hills, men gathered at Wallace's flag. The nobles who had once hesitated now beheld that resistance was not merely a possibility, yet triumphant. Stirling Bridge had undergone a remarkable transformation, uprising into transformation. Within the borders of England, the defeat was a profound embarrassment. Surrey narrowly evaded death, his reputation damaged. Edward I. The campaign in France would soon resonate the startling revelation that his triumph over Scotland was coming apart at the seams. Prior to Stirling Bridge, William Wallace was a name recognized primarily through hushed tones. A renegade, a defiant force, a perilous irritant in England's side. Following Stirling, his name resonated with power throughout Scotland and further afield. Throughout the duration, in the span of a solitary morning, Wallace found himself evolved from a guerrilla leader into a figure of great national significance, the quintessential representation of the struggle for Scotland's independence. The triumph dismantled the illusion of English unassailable strength. Edward I could no longer assert that Scotland was brought under control. No, the English crown could present for a longer duration. The conquest stands fully realized. Once there existed a people subdued under the weight of occupation, now possessed evidence. The possibility of that resistance achieving success is within reach. Wallace was propelled seemingly overnight into the position of protector of Scotland. With Andrew Moray severely injured at Stirling, he would succumb to his injuries in just a matter of weeks. Guidance of the uprising landed firmly on Wallace's shoulders. The fate of a nation now reclined alongside the renegade who had boldly stand your ground. During the ensuing months, Wallace advanced with urgency to unify Scottish power. English fortifications, shaken by the calamity, forsaken numerous castles and fortresses. Wallace's troops surged across the rural landscape, taking back communities and fortresses that succumbed to English control manage. The Scottish nobility, a considerable number of who had submitted to Edward after Dunar, now perceived the direction of the wind, blowing. Several openly aligned themselves with Wallace, while some extended measured backing. Although he did not come from a lineage of nobility, Wallace wielded a commanding presence triumph, and the crowd gathered around him with unparalleled devotion. Record of events, Wallace's charisma was undeniably potent like his sword. He motivated individuals not merely through demonstration, not through orders. He had a reputation consume the same sustenance as his troops, to walk beside them, to withstand their challenges. To the everyday people, Wallace was not a remote sovereign, but one of a man who had ascended from the same earth and battled for the same liberty. His presence took on a symbolic meaning. At the moment Wallace stepped into a town, banners opened wide, and the chimes of cathedrals rang. Mothers recounted tales of his actions. Clerics weave his name into their sermons. The uprising had shed its anonymity. It possessed a champion. However, triumph arrived with grief. Andrew Moore, of Wallace's co-commander at Stirling, yielded to his injuries shortly after the conflict. Moore had always been a masterful tactician, a distinguished individual whose reputation held significant influence among the distinguished class of Scotland. His passing was profound. The loss extends beyond Wallace himself, but to the whole movement. Wallace at this moment remained solitary at the forefront of the uprising. For a man devoid of nobility lineage, this was a delicate situation. However, the foundation of Wallace's legitimacy was not constructed not on birth, but on triumph. He had demonstrated that Scotland might be safeguarded. In regard to that was quite sufficient. Filled with triumph, Wallace did not merely protect Scotland, he took the initiative. In the autumn of 1297, he orchestrated incursions deep across northern England, instilling dread into Northland and Cumberland. These raids fulfilled various functions. Those individuals diminished English spirit and showcased the power of Scotland. They offered resources and loot to maintain the military forces of Scotland. A distinct message was conveyed to Edward I. Scotland would not simply withstand, yet respond. English chroniclers, appalled by the destruction, depicted scorched hamlets, broken strongholds, and filled with dread commoners retreating in the face of the Scots. Wallace's raids transformed the conflict into a conflict with two perspectives, demonstrating that the Scots might take the battle into the lands of England itself. As 1297 drew to a close, Wallace had received an official declaration protector of Scotland, governing on behalf regarding the missing King John Balliol, who was then in imprisonment in France. It was a remarkable rise for a man of his context. From renegade to protector in under a year, Wallace now stood as the commander and strategist of Scotland. His mark etched into the annals of time bear the words, "William, by the grace of the divine, protector of the realm of Scotland and the commander of its forces." The Battle of Stirling Bridge might have concluded. In 1297, the struggle for liberation persisted through the tale of Wallace. His the struggle transformed into Scotland's struggle, and his the name resonated as Scotland's everlasting call.